So all measurements have uncertainty. What happens when you take some measurements that you've made in the lab and you do a calculation with them? You're going to see that your calculated result also will have some uncertainty in it. How do you report that uncertainty? Well, what you're going to have to do is round your final result off so that it reflects the uncertainty that you had in your weakest measurement. So what you have to do is examine your calculation very carefully and look for the weakest link in the calculation. And that's going to determine how you round off your final result. Now we'll talk about how to do that on the next couple of slides, how to find the weakest link. But for now, let's talk about how we would round off our final result. Suppose the weakest link told us to round off the final result to 3 figures. And this was our final result. That's how it looked on our calculator. Well, if I'm going to round this off to 3 figures, what I'm going to do is put a cut through the number after the 3rd figure. So right between the 9 and the 4. Now I'm going to round it. And I round like this. There are many ways to round. This is just one way to round, but this is the simplest way, I think. Look at the right hand side of the cut, and you've got a 4 there, right? Now, if that number is less than 5, you just round down. So that would round down to a 0 in that place. Now, I'm not going to just cut it off and say 299 down here, because 299 is not the same thing as 2,994. I'm going to pad it off with a 0 there. So that'll round down to a 0. And there's my rounded result. It's rounded to 3 figures. Okay, what if I had this case over here? I have 19.998 is maybe the mathematical result. And I want to cut this one off to 3 figures, let's say. I'm going to put a cut through the number, and I'm going to look at the digit that is just to the right of the cut. And if it's bigger than 5, I'm going to round up. That means that I'm going to make this 9 the next digit up, which would be a 10. If I make that into a 10, it's going to carry the 1 here and then carry the 1 there. So I'm going to end up with 20.0. So when I round up, I end up with a number that's bigger than the original. And when I round down, I end up with a number that's smaller than the original. You round up when the number to the right of the cut is bigger than 5. So how do we know how many figures to round our final result off to? Like I said, we need to find the weakest link in the calculation. How do we do that? Well, it depends on what kind of operations we're doing in the calculation. When we're doing multiplying and dividing, your weakest link is going to be the measurement that has the fewest significant digits. So here is a place where we're going to use that skill that we just learned about counting significant digits in a measurement. We're going to count the significant digits in all of the measurements that we have, and we're going to take the lowest one. How many do we have in this? Suppose we want to do this operation. We want to figure out how many significant figures the final result is going to have. It's 3.0 centimeters times 2.00 centimeters divided by 1.000 grams. All right, so this has how many significant digits? 2, right? And this has how many significant digits? 3. And this has how many significant digits? 4. So this has 2, 3, and 4 significant digits. There's the weak link right there. So that was the weakest link. If I punch this into my calculator, or I can do it in my head, 3 times 2 divided by 1 is just going to be 6, right? I'm going to get 6, and I need to have my final answer rounded off to 2 figures. So to get it to 2 figures, I'm going to have to include the tenths place. Now take a look at the units here. They're centimeters squared per gram. How did I get that? Well, when you're multiplying and dividing, the units multiply and divide as well. So if you have centimeters times centimeters divided by grams, That's the same thing as centimeters squared divided by grams. So you have to put the units down that way. Now, something that's a little bit tricky is that addition and subtraction don't work the same way as multiplication and division as far as significant digits go. The way you identify the weakest link is different. You look for the measurement that has the fewest decimal places, and that's going to be the weakest link. So suppose I wanted to subtract 0.01 from 3.012 and then add 0.002 to that. I'm going to look for the weakest link here as the one with the fewest decimal places. Now, what do we mean by decimal places anyway? I mean how many digits you've got to the right of the decimal point, okay? So this one has 3 decimal places. This one has 2 decimal places. And this one has 3 decimal places, 3 digits to the right of the decimal point. So it looks like this one's the weak link, right? Now, when we round off the final answer, we are going to round it off so it has the same number of decimal places as the weakest link. So our weakest link had 2 decimal places, so we're going to round off our final result so that it has 2 decimal places as well. So it'll be 3.00 centimeters. What about the units in this case? But when you're adding and subtracting, it's a little bit simpler because when you're adding and subtracting numbers, they have to be in the same units. And so the result that you get is going to be in the same units too. All of the numbers we're adding and subtracting in this case are in centimeters. So our final result is going to be in centimeters as well.